Okay, so welcome prospective Promise Scholars. My name is Jody Maloney, and I am the Mason County Promise Director and the College Access Network Specialist. And I'm just going to share a little bit about the basics of using the Promise because it's not always evident how it works based on the materials you get. So I just want to give everybody an overview of what to expect if using the Promise at West Shore as a new Promise Scholar in fall of 2024. Okay, so first of all, what does the Promise cover? So the Promise is a middle dollar scholarship and it covers up to 72 credits of tuition and fees at West Shore Community College and is available for up to 6 years after a student's graduation from high school. And so that 6 year or 72 credits, it's whichever comes first. So when I say middle dollar scholarship, I'll explain a little bit more of what that means in a minute and give you some examples. But basically a middle dollar scholarship gets applied after federal and state grant dollars. So that could be TIP funding if you receive that from the state of Michigan, or Pell Grant. Basically, those are the two major ones that students might receive that get applied to tuition and fees. So if you have any need for tuition and fees after those two grants are applied, the Promise will cover the difference. For some students, that means their entire tuition and fee bill gets covered. For others, it might be a portion, and for others, it might be none. So it just really varies depending on your situation. Right now, the Promise does not specifically cover books, room and board, or any other non-tuition and fees-related expenses. However, we do have an educational supplies award that students can qualify for. It's not automatic, and so I'll share a little bit more about how to do that in a minute. Scholarship monies awarded to students outside of the Promise can be used for books, living costs, etc., whatever the individual scholarship allows you to use it for. The one thing that most students in Mason County in 2023 and 2024 have the option to qualify for is Michigan Achievement. And the minimum award for Michigan Achievement is actually awarded after Promise funds are used. So I get a lot of questions about that. How does that work? So it's actually the minimum award should be awarded after the Promise covers your tuition and fees. So for students who qualify for that, it should mean some dollar amount in their pockets to be used for other expenses related to going to college. And we strongly encourage students every single year to apply for scholarships that they may qualify for. And West Shore each year has a scholarship opportunity that is available to current and prospective students, and usually it's open until April 1st. So up until this year, we started offering the Promise in 2018, and we've awarded $1.75 million to Promise scholars toward their tuition and fees at West Shore. So you're here likely because you've already received your Promise approval notice, but there are some steps that have to take place even after that approval notice in order to receive the Promise. So one of them is, if you haven't already, be sure to apply to West Shore. It's a relatively quick process to apply, but it is absolutely required in order to be able to access classes at West Shore. Once you apply to West Shore, what they do is they'll send you automatically an email to whatever email account you use to apply. And I strongly advise you that you should always use your personal email, not a work-related or not a school-related email to apply to colleges. So once you complete that application, an email will be sent, and that will give you a link to complete online orientation. And the online orientation at West Shore is not too long or in depth, but it's also the key to getting into your student services account and to getting information on how to register for classes and get other student services at West Shore. So you absolutely have to complete online orientation for classes. We also recommend that students meet with, go ahead. Okay, sorry if I missed that, but there will be time. And if you have any questions at any time, feel free to just unmute and ask them. But we do recommend that Promise scholars meet with an advisor. And one of the ways that you can do that easily is by attending in-person orientation. And West Shore calls their in-person orientation Ramp It Up. So I'll give you some more information about that in a minute. But what advisors do is they give you course recommendations related to the degree program or certification that you're interested in, or give you advice on what to take, even if you don't know exactly what you want to pursue. So the information on who to contact for advising is generally provided after you complete online orientation. But again, there will be an opportunity to connect with an advisor at the Ramp It Up in-person orientation. Another next step that is absolutely required in order to use the promise is to complete the FAFSA. So make sure when you're completing your FAFSA that you list West Shore Community College as your first choice, because that's required for using the promise. And West Shore, another reason that you want to list it as your first choice is if you are eligible for Michigan Achievement, that first choice is what triggers Michigan Achievement to be applied and available for you at the institution you're attending. So the only exception to that is being a summer guest student, and that's where you attend a different college besides West Shore, but go to West Shore in the summer only. And that's not going to apply to most students who are planning to start this fall. Another thing that students can do as a next step after being approved for the promise is make a plan to qualify for the first year of educational supplies. So the Educational Supplies Award is a scholarship option on top of your promise scholarship. And this award is $500. It's awarded once per year, up to 2 times total. And so 2 times total in the whole 6-year period that a student has available to use the promise. So there are ways that you're able to qualify, and I'll talk about those, but briefly, you have to, for the first year to qualify, you have to attend summer orientation in person at West Shore. And there are some dates, and I'll show you where to find that information, but it's either the 17th or the 18th of July. You have to have completed your FAFSA, and both of those things you have to have done by August 1st, 2024, and you have to register for 12 or more credits by August 1st, 2024, prior to your fall start. So that's a little bit of information. I'll get more in depth there. Also, the Promise Scholarship, while we have no set deadline, besides like making sure that you apply for the initial award before that 6-year period expires, students who apply or renew after a semester has passed, if you miss the promise renewal or you didn't apply and you happen to attend West Shore prior to that, you do not receive scholarship funding retroactively. So you have to make sure that you're an approved promise scholar. So anybody here, you're here because you have received that promise scholarship approval. So that doesn't really apply to you, but maybe if you have friends who are thinking about it or not sure, let them know, apply sooner rather than later. It's always a good idea. And then promise scholarship denials. Now, if you've received the approval notice, you're all set for this year, but each year students have to renew their promise, and it's possible in a future year to be denied depending on your academic circumstances. And so we do have the option for students to appeal if that is the case, but right now, don't have to worry about it. So how does the promise work? After you've registered for classes, so we talked a little bit about how to register and options you have. After you've registered for classes at West Shore, you're going to have a bill, and that bill will be available via your student services account, which is mywestshore.edu. And again, you get access to that student services account after you've applied and completed online orientation. So once you have that bill, you can know that if you've completed your FAFSA and you've got the approval notice from the promise, your tuition is going to be covered. However, it's not always evident on your bill until after classes have started. So if you received that approval letter from me in June or from the Mason County Promise in June, and you've completed your FAFSA, you should be all set. And there might be, if you've received your financial aid award notice, there might be a note in there that also says, hey, it looks like you're eligible for the Mason County Promise. So in that case, your tuition and mandatory fees will be covered. But the promise is not going to show up as like a traditional scholarship for a set amount would. So sometimes if you have received a scholarship from another organization, it might be for $500, and that could show up on your account as a $500 scholarship. Because your tuition and mandatory fees vary every semester, the promise isn't a set amount. Your financial aid grants have to be applied first, and then whatever is left over for tuition and fees that you still owe, the promise will cover as long as you're approved. So we apply that, or West Shore will apply the promise to your tuition and bill once your FAFSA is completed, and any federal or state financial aid grant money is applied, and then they bill us for whatever is remaining. So sometimes student bills still appear into the semester. As long as you've got an approved promise and you've completed your FAFSA and nobody from financial aid is knocking on your door saying you have to do X, Y, or Z, then usually you are all set. We'll cover that bill and you'll be set to register for next semester when registration opens. You also must renew your FAFSA each year. So here's sometimes where students run into issues after using the promise for a year. After winter grades post, we require students to renew their FAFSA and renew their promise. And if you don't renew one of those things and list West Shore on your FAFSA and let me know that you're intending to use your promise again at West Shore, you may not be renewed, in which case the promise would not be applied for a future year. And so typically I will send out reminders to any students who have applied in a given year. Hey, it looks like it's renewal time. Be sure to renew, and here are the steps. And so be sure to check emails and actually read them if I send them to you. I try not to send students any just random garbage. I usually send things appropriate to your scholarship. And so if you see something from info@masoncountypromise.org or from me, Jody M. at ludington.org, know that that's something that is intended for you, and I really want you to read it. So everybody, you can see on your screen here the new Promise Scholar checklist. Everybody who received a Promise Scholarship approval notice also received this checklist, and I strongly advise you to complete each of the steps, including registering for Ramp It Up. And so the way to register for Ramp It Up is the QR scan code on the bottom. And the reason you want to register for Ramp It Up, which is West Shore's in-person orientation option, is because that is a step that will help you to qualify for the Educational Supplies Award. The only exception for that is for students who graduated from ASM Tech, in which case they have already been on West Shore's campus for years. They're not necessarily required, although they can, they're not necessarily required to attend Ramp It Up for qualifying for the Educational Supplies Award, but every other student, so if you attended Ludington, if you attended and graduated from Mason County Central, Mason County Eastern, Gateway to Success Academy, homeschool, or another high school, if you want to qualify for the Educational Supplies Award, which is $500 that will be awarded in fall 2024, then you must attend Ramp It Up, the in-person orientation at West Shore. You must also complete your FAFSA and register for 12 or more credits in fall semester, no later than August 1st, 2024. The Educational Supplies Award is available up to 2 times, as I shared earlier. So it can be, it's awarded in your first year if you qualify, and it can be awarded in your first renewing year, which for most students is their second year at West Shore. So we talked a little bit about how to qualify for year 1 award, but for the year 2 award, you have to take first year seminar, which is FYS 101. And that's a 2-credit class, and you have to take that in your first year and receive a C or better. So just make a mental note of that when you're planning on registering. That first year seminar is something that's required in order to qualify for the second year of Educational Supplies Award, which will likely again be $500. And that, as a reminder, is awarded 1 time each year. And that can be applied to any other cost of attendance. So if you have books or educational supplies, you can use it for that. And that will be available to students at first in the bookstore. And West Shore's bookstore is, they have a physical bookstore, which is more of a spirit shop, but the actual bookstore is available online, and students can use the Educational Supplies Awards starting in mid-August. It'll be accredited to your student account. You can use it at West Shore's bookstore online. And if for some reason your book isn't available or your course materials aren't available in the bookstore, after courses start, so after that first day of classes, you'll have another 2-week period, and then that drop period will end. And so the first 2 weeks of every semester are your drop period where students can drop out of classes. Once that period ends, any amount of that $500 that you haven't spent at the bookstore will be dispersed to you through the financial aid disbursement process. And if you have questions about how that works exactly, I'm happy to talk to you about it after. or you can talk to anybody in financial aid and they can explain that process to you. Because it's pretty new to everybody if you're starting out at college, but it's once you get a year in, you'll understand most of the disbursement process completely. But again, the Educational Supplies Award isn't automatic. You can qualify for up to 2 times in your first year once and your second year once, but you must qualify. It's not automatic for approved Promise Scholars. So I think I gave you most of the information about this screen, but I'm going to send this to everybody who is a first-year scholar so that you can read through these requirements. But the big part is have your FAFSA done, attend in-person orientation called Ramp It Up at West Shore, and register for 12 or more credits prior to August 1st to qualify for that award. So here's a little information about Ramp It Up, which is West Shore's in-person orientation. And the dates for this will be on July 16th. There's a morning session, or July 17th, which is an afternoon session. In-person orientation is about 3 hours, and it's a good way to meet other West Shore students, and that's open to any student who is going to be a first-year student at West Shore, not just Promise Scholars, but we strongly emphasize for Promise Scholars to attend. It is not required, but it is the way that Promise Scholars in their first year can qualify for the Educational Supplies Award of $500. And then the second year for qualification for first year or for the Educational Supplies Award, which will likely again be $500, although it may vary from year to year. In order to qualify for that, you have to complete your FAFSA, register for 12 credits or more, and have taken first year seminar in your first year at West Shore and passed it with a C or better. So all of that information is available, and I will make sure that you have that, but this is just a little information about what first year seminar primarily helps students to do. Explore academic pathways, especially for students who haven't planned on a concrete major or are interested in a major but don't really understand all the career opportunities through it. Connect with other students, build a resume, get inside information about college resources, but also about colleges beyond West Shore, because a lot of students starting at West Shore are thinking about transferring eventually, and so this is another way that you can explore those options. So here I just wanted to give students an example of what, when I say first dollar, middle dollar, Pell Grant, et cetera, what that looks like for students in different income categories and different full-time, part-time statuses at West Shore. So basically, there's multiple ways that you can qualify for the promise and multiple ways that you can qualify for financial aid. But because we're middle dollar, sometimes I run into situations where students are expecting a set amount of dollars to be sent to them as part of the promise, and that's just not how it works. So if you look at the second line down, first dollar funds, federal Pell, Michigan TIP, those are the primary sources of grant funds. There are a few others in Michigan, but those are the primary sources that most students, if they're going to receive any grant dollars from the federal government or from Michigan, receive. So full Pell is about $3,700, and that would cover pretty much all tuition and fees that a student could get. So if a student is awarded full Pell through the financial aid FAFSA process through the federal government, they're probably not going to need any promise funds to cover their tuition and fees. They may still qualify and will likely qualify for the minimum award for Michigan Achievement, so that would still be awarded to them. And they could still qualify for the Promise Educational Supplies Award, which here colloquially I just call the Book Award. So those are options for students who get full Pell. Some students have a middle amount of need and they might qualify for partial Pell. And so partial Pell would cover part of tuition, but maybe not all, in which case the promise will cover the rest of any tuition costs. If that student qualifies for Michigan Achievement, they could still get the minimum award, and then they could still have the option to qualify for the Educational Supplies Book Award. You'll see on the bottom line, work, study, and loans. Most students who qualify for the promise at West Shore are not ever going to need work, study, or loans. However, if you qualify for work study, that will make it easier for you to get a job on campus. And so that's money in your pocket. So if you are still working on your FAFSA and FAFSA asks you, are you interested in work study? Always be sure to check yes. It doesn't mean you have to work on campus, but it means if you decide to work on campus, it'll be much easier for you to find a job. Just going across the columns here, low need student. So this would be a student who probably would not be eligible for Pell and possibly not eligible for TIP, although it could still be a situation where a student is TIP eligible. And TIP, when I say TIP, is the tuition incentive program that is really tied to a student's usage of state-based healthcare resources. And so if a student doesn't qualify for Pell, doesn't qualify for TIP, then the promise will cover whatever their tuition and fees are. And again, they may qualify for Michigan Achievement, and they can qualify for the Promise Educational Supplies Award. And a student who has no financial need, they would not qualify for federal Pell Grant. They probably wouldn't qualify for TIP, but it's possible they might. And this is why it's so important to always read your financial aid documentation from West Shore or whatever college you decide to attend eventually. But in the situation where a no-need student attends West Shore, if they qualify for the promise, we're going to cover all of their tuition and fees. And this $1,500 is just an estimate for some students, especially those who are, pursuing a program like the MSU Agriculture program at West Shore. They might have $2,500 or even $4,500 worth of tuition. Whatever the tuition and fees are, the promise will make sure that if there's a gap in funding, we cover it. And then for those students who are no need, they would not qualify for Michigan Achievement Award because that is a need-based scholarship for which about 80 to 90% of Mason County students qualify, but some students won't. So in that case, the promise covers all their tuition. They don't receive Michigan Achievement in any form, and they would still be eligible to qualify for the Promise Educational Supplies Award. There are a couple special programs at West Shore where using the promise is a little more complicated. And so I just wanted to make mention of those. And if these are programs that you're interested in, we have forms at our website to be able to make sure that you get covered. So one of those was the West Shore MSU Agriculture Program, and that's a partnership between West Shore Community College and Michigan State University. And there are some special steps to make sure that students' financial aid gets applied from West Shore to their Michigan State tuition. And so there's a checklist for those students on our website, masoncountypromise.org/students, that you can download. Students in a few of the healthcare programs offered at West Shore, these are typically certification programs and not necessarily nursing, but some of the other certifications that West Shore offers in the healthcare field, they may be required to use courses from partner colleges to meet their certification or degree course requirements. And so in the case of those students, and again, it's a very specific group, so for most students it won't apply, but if you're pursuing one of the programs that is in healthcare and has the option of certification, I want you to check out our website, again, masoncountypromise.org/students. Because for you would have to, if you are in one of these programs, you have to have your advisor sign off, and then you'd have to pay out of pocket at that partner institution. And by partner institution, usually it's a different community college in the state of Michigan that offers the course online, and students can take that course online, but then transfer it back to West Shore to meet their certification requirements. So this is a lot of information, and I don't expect you to necessarily understand it, but it's likely if you pursue one of these programs, your advisor is going to talk to you about the required courses from other schools. If you hear that information, you can know that this is probably going to be necessary for you. So for those students in those very specific certification programs, you will have to actually set up a payment plan or make a plan to pay out of pocket for the classes offered at institutions other than West Shore. And for some students, that'll mean just using your financial aid overage from Pell Grant. But for other students, it may mean that you have to pay out of pocket and then request the promise reimburse you through West Shore's business office. So all of that is outlined on the checklist at our website, and there's a form for your advisor to sign off on. So there's also on our website on that same page, masoncountypromise.org/students, the first year scholar handbook, which has some of these materials in it that we're seeing here today, and a checklist similar to what you received in your approval notice, just to get you started and so you're prepared for using the promise at West Shore. It also has a list of great resources at West Shore that you may want to tap into early. West Shore has success coaching that they offer, and as soon as you're approved and have registered for classes at West Shore, even if it's summer and you haven't started those classes yet, you can take advantage of the success coaching that West Shore offers. If you're working on your FAFSA, another resource that West Shore offers is financial aid advising. And so if FAFSA is not being your friend right now, which it is for many, many students, you can actually make an appointment with an appointment with West Shore Community College's financial aid office to get support and get through some of the more challenging pieces of the FAFSA. Okay, finally, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that all approved promise scholars will need to renew their promise every year. So part of the renewal process is completing the FAFSA and then submitting a renewal application on the promise website. And you don't have to do those in a specific order. It just has to be done before you take classes at West Shore in a given academic year. So for students this year who are approved to use the promise, that covers courses in fall 2024 and winter 2025. After winter 2025, you will need to renew your promise to be able to use it in summer 2025 and thereafter. And so to renew your promise, you just go to our website, you submit a renewal application, and then you request your transcript from West Shore and request that transcript, which is just basically a picture of all the classes you've attempted and all the grades that you've gotten. And you ask that gets sent to me at info@masoncountypromise.org. And so once you've done that, then I can complete your promise renewal portion. You also have to make sure that you complete the FAFSA renewal and make sure that West Shore is still listed as your first choice institution. There's no minimum number of credits that students have to take for any term. However, students, again, who take 12 credits in fall and winter, which we encourage you to do in order to qualify for that Educational Supplies Award. One of the reasons we encourage you to do that is because taking 12 credits each fall and winter semester has been shown to correspond with students being more likely to complete their college degree. And so starting college is wonderful. We really, really, really strongly want you to finish your program so that you get that college credential that you've chosen to pursue. And so they do recommend in general that taking a full-time course load is helpful for doing that college completion piece. Promise scholars who are attending in summer only as guest students have to renew their promise. Renewal requires submission of transcripts in order to be processed. So if you are one of those students, and we probably have a handful every year, maybe 10 to 20 students who attend GVSU or MSU or Ferris, and they want to just take a couple of summer classes, you have to renew your promise just like everybody else does, even though you haven't been attending West Shore year round. The thing that I look at when I'm looking at a promise renewal is whether or not you have credits available. So how many credits you've attempted, and most students have credit available in their first and second and even their third year at West Shore. So that's one thing that I look at, and I will let you know when I approve your promise, how many credits you have remaining out of the total of 72 attempted credits. The other thing that I look at when you're renewing your promise is whether or not you're maintaining satisfactory academic progress. And so that means satisfactory academic progress is actually a financial aid term, and it relates to being in good standing. And so good standing is maintaining a 2.0 overall GPA. So that's a C average. And overall means over all of the semesters you've attended West Shore. And then completing and passing 67% or more of all of the attempted credits that you've taken. So those are the two things that I look at. If for some reason it doesn't look like you're meeting that, I'm going to check with financial aid to make sure that my interpretation is correct. And if you're not meeting satisfactory academic progress, you will be required to complete a satisfactory academic progress appeal with West Shore's financial aid office, and also complete a promise appeal in order to get your scholarship reinstated. But as long as you're on board and getting a 2.0 GPA or higher and passing 67% or more of all the classes you've attempted, you're going to be all set for using the promise. It's rare, but it does happen that students fall below the satisfactory academic progress requirements. And I would even say it's normal occasionally for students to do that. And so if that happens to you, don't feel shame. What I want you to do is make sure that you reach out and get support, both from myself, from financial aid, and from anyone else who you need to encourage you to keep moving forward. Because one semester where you run into a bump in a road, it happens. It happens on occasion to more students who and probably they don't talk about it. But I just want you to know that if that happens to you, it's not a message to stop college necessarily. It's a message to change things up. And West Shore has a lot of supports. They have a tutoring center. So hopefully you'll never get to that point. But if you do, please make sure that you reach out for support. The question of how to pay for college, it's serious and in some cases a no-go. So I just want to check, can you guys hear that right now? Okay. Well, I'm going to just email this out because I don't know if you guys can hear it or not. And so I don't want to make you sit through a 2-minute video if it's the case that you can't actually hear it. So I'm going to open the floor if anyone has questions. I'm also going to stop recording at this time, but if you want to contact me, here's my contact information. Otherwise, let me know what questions you have now, and I am available Monday through Friday from 8 in the morning until 5 p.m. And then I usually check my email at other times too. So if you have questions, please let me know. But I've stopped recording in case anybody has questions about using the promise. Feel free to ask now. Okay, and if you don't have any questions, we're all set. That's the end of the presentation. So thank you guys for being here and have a great week. And let me know if you have any questions offline.